fa che mo fa sera.
Welcome to Talking in Stations, an EVE Online podcast. I am Matt Arall, your host. Today we're going to talk about the Imperium's campaign in the north. And with the deal struck between Sword Dragon and the Imperium, this campaign seems to be over. And following that was another deal struck in the south between Fraternity and Test Alliance. So with those two peace treaties signed, that essentially ends the war that we've been talking about for the last 2 months. So today we have a couple of panels, guys, and we have Asher Elias, the FC from Goonswarm. We'll get to him in just a second. I want to say hi to Dirk McGurk first.
Good morning, Matt Arall.
Good morning.
Buenos dias.
That's right. Mexican Independence Day was just the other day. But I did want to say to the crowd that this is like exactly what Talking in Stations was always meant to be, is smart guys talking about EVE Online over coffee. So next we have another smart guy, Artemis Alboza.
You need to warn me when you're going to mention coffee because I never have it. We need to get better at preparing for these things. So it is afternoon and I have water. How's it going?
Millennials.
We'll just call you Mormon. And today's guest, we have one of two. The second one is going to show up in a little while. But we have Asher Elias with us. He is the FC for Imperium and Goonswarm.
I think I'm on the wrong show. You wanted smart people, and I'm concerned.
Asher is one of...
What are you drinking?
I have Crystal Light Lemonade. Sorry to disappoint. Yeah.
It's like a Southern Admiral in the U.S. Navy, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So Asher is also a podcaster who had the Asher Hour, which was an FC's podcast, which was brilliant because if you ever want to know anything about FCing and fleet doctrines and strategies, that was the show to listen to. And he is one of the few guys that could really carry a show by himself. I think one episode he actually talked for a full hour by himself, which was amazing.
Oh, one of my skills.
Yeah.
I will fill the airwaves.
The audience wants to know, is that legit Crystal Light or is it Kirkland signature brand? Or
it actually is Kirkland brand lemonade. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm living up to the meme. At Costco, you can buy like a whole package of them. You get like 40 of the little packs, you know? Oh, man. It's such a good value.
What is that meme about, you and Kirkland?
You know, you're just on a fleet and you're shooting a structure and you just have time to kill, right? And so I eat a lot of Kirkland protein bars. Like I used to eat Quest protein bars. They're like $2.50 per bar. And I think Costco, like they made their own knockoff of the Kirkland ones and they're $1 per bar. So I have a lot of them. And I would just start talking about how they're delicious and nutritious and like give my fleet a whole pitch about how great they were. And it just kind of spiraled out of control because I would just shove it in at inappropriate times. Dirk knows all about that. And
he is to Kirkland what Sapporo Jones is to Subaru.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So yeah, because I think they were going to name a Keepstar after the Kirkland something.
Yeah, it's the Kirkland Protein Star. Goons are calling it the Kirkland Protein War. So the meme is spread. It's infectious.
I was wondering about that because there's a lot to be said about the fight over the name. Even we at TAS were discussing that. Yeah, like how do you brand this war? You guys are calling it the Protein War?
Kirkland Protein War, yeah. I just think it's just a funny name because it's not consequential and there's really no baggage attached to it, so people just enjoy it. That's why I think you have people glommed onto it. Yeah, probably the worse we were doing, the more we would fight over the power of the name, right? Like there's still bitter fighting over what to call World War B / the Casino War, right? Like there's still people arguing over that 2 years later because it inflames such passions. This war has been, let's call it a bit of a rollover, even though it was probably hard fought. So I think that people have less invested in what to call it.
Well, I mean,
Hmm.
and this was a topic when I saw it. It was like 3:00 in the morning my time, and they're like, what are we calling this war? And like there are people kind of throwing some stuff out and whatnot, and a lot of it, I think that it was depending on I guess where they were coming from, was focused sort of on what was happening in the North. And I'm like, the war was going on well before that. It was going on well before 2 months ago, Matterall, when you talked about how we've been talking about this war for 2 months. I mean, really, the 2 months has only been what I've deemed to be the escalation that resulted in the Imperium going active into a campaign that was part of a larger war. I don't know that I would call what the Imperium did in the North a war in and of itself, as much as a campaign related to a second front in the larger thing. When after PL decided that they were going to bring in all their heavy stuff down into the South, and then the Imperium decided that they were going to go active into something that they had only had SIGs involved with before. So it's kind of hard to name the giant global picture, because of like where it began and then kind of what really came out of it. I mean, like we've always looked at sort of like, well, what consequentially happened in these things to maybe sort of give it some definable name, and even that's hard.
So you've got the Mittens, as much as he would like to deny that he would ever compare Eve to real life history, he does really like the Chevauchée, which was like this word that was described as a sort of British tactic where they would like go to France, raid a bunch of villages, and then just go home essentially. And it was sort of like a war, but it was more of a raid where you weren't actually trying to take anything. And he's used the term before, but it actually really fits in this one. And I do agree, it's kind of hard to define the starting point because, I've been in the North since November, and you guys often saw these, battle reports we were talking about where we were fighting 2 or 3 to 1 and we were winning pretty consistently. Pretty much, I'd say we won at least 95% of our fights, and we were almost always outnumbered, and especially at the start.
And by the way, you used to want to keep that quiet. You're like, yeah, we're not talking about it. We don't want it ruined. We're having a great time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what I always say is that the most precious resource in Eve is fun or fights. And if you have fights, other people will want to be involved in them because it's the thing that you cannot make more of, right? So if you let people know that they're happening, they will come and they will ruin it. It's unintentionally. It's a tragedy of the commons type thing where you only have enough grass for 5 sheep, but 18 sheep want to eat, right? So
I would argue that changes depending on what scale you're fighting at, because having fought out in Great Wildlands and chatted about it a lot, all we've just had are similar sized groups jumping in as third parties, and so instead of a 2-way fight, you have a 4-way fight. I think at your scale, it's bat phones. It's not third parties, and that's what ruins it.
I was worried about that Great Wildlands stuff because someone was promoting it on Reddit, and I'm like, that's going to get out of control real quick. Like that's one of my rules. I tell my guys, don't ever post on Reddit. Just don't talk in local. Don't post on Reddit. Don't draw any attention to yourself when you're getting what you want because, it's bad. It doesn't help. So like when I was posting on Reddit during these, this sort of the pre-war, which you would call like when Reavers and then later Space Violence were there and Black Ops from Goons. The only time you want to post like that is when you want it's for the benefit of your enemy, right? It's so that they see something because I'm in their comms. I read their pings, and they're not good at spin. They don't spin. They just lie. And so when you see that, you have to get out your message of like, you lost. You have to let the people know on the other side that they lost because the other side will not tell their dudes. So that's the only time you need to do it because you're trying to break their spirit. Because when they're bringing 3 times your number of guys, you have to do something to trim those numbers a little bit. And so that's where the morale comes in. But if you start posting about your dunks and you're gloating or you're bragging, you're going to end up drawing people who want to take that smug from you and who want to have the fun that you're having, and it'll ruin it.
Yeah. So you have a bunch of spies in there and you're killing their dudes.
Yeah. Blackhand is the best it's ever been since I've been here by quite a bit. When ND used to run the Blackhand, and when he left to go to PL, We had one test spy and we had one brave newbie spy, and I think that was it. So, and we would talk about how great the agency was, but it was 100% a bluff. You know what I mean? Like there was just nothing. And it's been rebuilt to the point where we are in every group everywhere and have active agents. And the nice thing about this kind of campaign was these agents, you put them in a group and you have them say, oh, you have them join, let's say they join Mortis Angels, right? But if you're not fighting Mortis Angels, they don't feel very, used because there's no purpose. So when you have them in a group and then they can help you and they can say, hey, this is the fleet they're forming. And give you information, and this is what their FC is thinking. It gives them a lot of purpose, and like a lot of them, message me or send me a message saying, "Hey, this is really fun," or some of the most fun I've had doing this. So I feel really good about it.
So it's still a big thing, right? All the spying thing, like that never went away.
No, it won't. It's to fight without spies is. I don't know. It's like deciding that fighting with one hand is more honorable than fighting with two, and just hurting yourself for no real reason. Like it's a, if you want to call it a race to the bottom, if you find it ethically distasteful or distasteful for any reason, then maybe it is. But if you don't do it, you're going to lose. I like to look at Eve as sort of a evolution simulator. The alliances that succeed are those that adapt to the conditions. And the ones who do not are those who get eliminated by natural selection. Like the reason that everyone runs fleets in a certain way now is because it's not because it is because it's the best way to do it. But it's not because you had to. It's because all the alliances that didn't died, and so those FCs that didn't want to run in that certain way lose the ability to run fleets. So it is like evolution, where you see you're being pushed towards a more effective way, and if you don't do it, you're going to die.
Yeah.
It is funny the way that spies get used, because it's like, obviously you got things like the Black Hand, right, which are really deep penetration type stuff, and looking for intel and things like that, right? And then I've never actually experienced this in the Imperium that I can remember, but I have been other places where, like, the way I would experience we've got to spy some places when a fleet's going on, and it's like all you're hearing every once in a while is so and so broadcast for reps.
Yeah.
And I'm going, okay, what's going to, and then it's like, Dirk McGurk broadcast for reps. And I'm like, but I'm not locked up yet. Oh, let me broadcast though. And then like 30 seconds later, you're getting yellow box.
Yeah. The spy life, like, people picture themselves being James Bond, but it's really unglamorous. It's having to listen to two comms at once, relaying who their primary is, just stuff like that. That is really kind of boring overall, but extremely important.
All right, well, let's talk about this conflict, because it started, and we'll get to the present day stuff that happened this week where the treaties were signed and there was pressure applied to Guardians of the Galaxy.
Peace in our time.
Yeah, but let's go back. Let's go back to what you would call the beginning of that war. Like what happened? Or was that too long ago?
No, it's not. The events in Eve tie together, and like I don't.
It's a continuum, right?
Exactly. I don't personally do the casino war is still going on thing that people say, but it is related. So the reason that we were in the North at all was because we went to Conan with all our capitals, right? And that was about a year ago, actually. And we had a guy, Big Bill the Boss 3. He did not want to fly his capitals back to Delve, and his insurance was running out. So what he did was he started solo dropping in Declan. He's like, "There's lots of Rorquals here. My insurance is about to run out, so I'm just going to drop him here." And then even though he was doing, let's say, questionable tactics like sieging a dread on a Rorqual, which is a really bad idea, he was still getting a pretty decent amount of kills. So then he was like, "Oh, guys, come up here," and then 8 guys came up there. And then the Goon Black Ops 6 saw this, and they came up there. And then Zungen from Black Ops messaged me. He's like, "Oh, you should bring Reavers up here." This was like a month after Bill went up there. And so once I went up there, I was telling Kendar about it. And so 2 or 3 months later, he brings Space Violence up there.
Oh, so you were
and
before Kendar. Okay.
yeah. Basically, they actually had their stuff timed to U.S. time zone because they thought that'd be annoying. And when we came up there, and Reavers' U.S. time zone, they timed it to EU time zone, and Kendar and Space Violence are EU time zone. So when Kendar and EU time zone came up there, they timed it to Australian time zone. Now that this war is over, I'm gonna go on a big push against time zone taking. I think it's really bad for the game. I think your time zone should be set based on your activity, because it's just the number one reason that people don't go places and fight, because they know if we show up a week later, I won't be able to fight over any of the objectives because they'll time it away from me. So you have, like, the bare minimum requirement for going to someone else's space and fighting over it is I have to have 24/7 coverage. And I think that's way too high of a bar for you to make progress against attacking an enemy.
That's cool. Real quick, do you think they can do that by looking at when most of your guys are achieving kills or dying and say, yeah, this is their...
I think the way to do it is just to tie it to rats killed in system, because it's the hardest way that you could, or easiest. Excuse me. It is the toughest one to game, and if you end up with if there's a system that literally no one rats in, you would have the time zone set to when some roamer comes through and kills a gate rat, right? But that means that you don't control the system at all. It would also open up interesting things where if you wanted to, like, reset their timers, you could effectively take control of the system and keep them from ratting for like a whole week, where you only ratted in your appropriate period of time, and it would reset the timer. But that would require you to demonstrate a huge level of control of the system, which basically means that they have none of it.
That falls apart if you're like a mostly, take for example, a mostly USTZ organization who is going to war with someone. Suddenly all of the USTZ folks are out fighting all the time, and the only people who are ratting in their space, at least the majority of people who are ratting in their space, are the ones out of that time zone who have time not fighting. So if you go to war on an offensive war, suddenly your time zone tanking is going to flip to a not optimal time zone.
Well, I don't want to get too far into the mechanics because we're going through
Fair
history,
enough.
but yeah, we'll get back to.
I feel like time zone tanking is one of those topics like Loki camping.
Yeah, we'll come back to time zone tanking when we put together a brief to give to CSM. Go on, Asher. You were telling us, like, I forget where you left it.
Goes down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. No, but you were before. I interrupted you first. I said that you came before space violence showed up.
Yeah, right. So So they timed it to EU, so we space violence to come up. Then they timed it to Australian time zone. So it became the thing where we really couldn't hit any of their structures because they just kept timing away from the fights. Which, I mean, was rewarding in and of itself, because you're talking about goon sigs where the U.S. time zone sig was getting at best, our best fleet was 80 people, right? But a normal fleet was 50 to 60, and Kendar and Space Violence gets 70 to 100. So versus G2G, CO2, and all their hangers on.
Was CO2 there at that time?
They moved in around the time when Space Violence came. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But yeah, they were there for these fights, and I mean, you saw the results. Even when we couldn't hit their structures effectively, we could still start anchoring ours around their Keepstar and forcing them to come fight, or let us have structures like on their Keepstar grid, which I think is a huge embarrassment to an alliance. Like if like, I think that's terrible for morale. Like, you undock and there is an enemy structure anchored on your Keepstar grid, like, that sends an awful message to your members, especially when they've seen the size of the enemy fleets, right? And you keep telling them that you're winning. Like, that's why I started doing that. Like, every day I would just drop a new structure, because I would make the messages or the names of the structures a message like like that we were winning, or that your alliance was lying to you, because they were, and that kind of thing tears down morale. And so we would force them to fight that way, and then you'd occasionally see, oh, here a super died from GTG. Oh, here 5 Titans died from GTG. Oh, here Sword Dragon's Avatar died from GTG. Like even with all of these, even with them time zone taking us out, we were still able to get pretty big set pieces where we won very handily.
So
Were there any you were hiding?
Say that again.
Were there any that you were hiding? Like, were you? I mean, you're putting out there like every time something happens to them, but anytime you lose a fight and stuff like that.
Oh no, Riot Rick is in their alliance. Don't worry. Anytime there was anything close to resembling a loss, he was just more than happy to post it on Reddit. So there wasn't anything that
Got
wasn't.
missed.
Yeah,
all right, I'm thinking about like INN articles and stuff like that. If that was, if there was, people are likely to write about stuff when they're winning, and then articles where they're losing is probably not so much. But again, that goes to writers wanting to write. Yeah, self-selecting. Sorry, Dirk, I jumped in front of you. Go
no,
ahead.
that's fine. So the SIGs were up there, and it sounds like it was just sort of a happenstance sort of build up of, hey, look, there's activity here. We should maybe get a little a few more people involved or whatever. It kind of grew organically over time, let's call it. I want to say the first big thing that sort of happened up there, though, right, was we stumbled across reinforcing that keep star in 9-4, right, and dropped a whole bunch of structures all around it.
Let me think about it.
I mean, because with that, when that went down, right, there was a lot of speculation out there about, oh, is this an invasion of the North, right? And
right.
and I want to say the mantra coming out of the Imperium was, we just got SIGs deployed up there. Oh, look, we just stumbled across this thing, and whoops, it reinforced itself.
Dirk,
that was pretty much unrelated, though. I mean, I think that really had nothing to do with it.
I think right before that, though, there was a signal, at least I heard from certain channels, that you guys were going all in, like things were starting to like build up. Either an increase in aggression or something was happening.
You're talking about 9-Tech 4 back in January?
I'm talking before 9-Tech 4. There was...
So, like, from the inside, from MC's perspective, we thought things were getting serious when we started having fights happening in Branch and in Declan and on sort of like the edge of Tribute all at the same time. Like this was at the time when stations were still flipping over, right? So you still had solve over stations to see who would get the final outposts. And when we saw all of these timers happening at the same time, seemingly coordinated, that seemed more than just, a few SIGs deployed down there on their own to us.
Yeah, I can tell you it wasn't. It wasn't. I mean, I had to.
Pure luck that it happened to be at the same time.
Not pure luck. I mean, it's just the strategy is to make people run around, move their fleets so that you have an option to hit them. Like that's just good strategy for running a guerrilla type campaign.
Were you trying to grab any of those keep stars? Any of those forts before they flipped the stations?
Are you talking about the forts they flipped to us?
Not recently, but when the whole system
faction
changed.
forts.
Yeah, faction forts. Were you trying to grab any like?
Yeah. We were like, it'd be fun to grab some, but we knew that in Australian time zone we really couldn't win the timers, so it wasn't really a serious option.
Can we talk for a moment about how you were winning the fights when you were so massively outnumbered? If you're willing to discuss it, because that seems the most interesting part of it.
Not without me sounding like a giant smug asshole.
Okay.
You have 5 minutes of permission to sound like it.
I don't actually really like to do that too much. Yeah. Hey. It's just, I think part of it is that like the more you rely on your whole alliance, the more you have people who are just generally really casual people, and just the value they bring is less than someone who's like really focused. So it's once again a self-selecting thing. So someone who joins Reavers probably will come with the right fit. They probably will not ask a bad question while you're trying to focus on something and distract you. And overall, each of those people is worth more than a main fleet kind of guy. And so when you're fighting an enemy who they have to go and get the guy who hasn't been paying attention for 3 weeks and just comes on this one fleet, that's something that the FC or someone on his crew has to spend their focus on. And so you're fighting. Like anytime you get a small self-selecting group of people, they're probably going to beat a random slice of people chosen from like main fleet of any alliance. And so it probably just helps that. And like on a personal level, I just don't like to lose, and so I prepare a lot. And it's just like what I was talking about evolution with FCs. It applies the same way. Like the things you did even 5 years ago, a good FC did, like a mediocre FC does today, right? A mediocre FC today is probably the best FC 10 years ago. And when you have so when you put in the extra effort, and which is something that my fleets sometimes make fun of me for going overboard on, you tend to do better.
There's a bunch of main fleet guys out in the Twitch chat that are asking if you're talking about them. Is he talking about me?
Yeah, I wasn't referring to any particular member. It was like
I'm like main fleet equals conscripts.
a joke.
I mean, I think if
public.
you have to ask that question, you can rest assured it's probably a reference.
Okay, let me let you in. He's got main fleet guys in every harbor, so you're not the special one.
I don't like, and the thing is, I'm not one of those people who looks down on flying with main fleet or whatever. Like I just, I mean, you just have to be aware of what you're doing. Like you have to fly maybe a simpler doctrine. Like you can't run like a super specialized doctrine that requires everyone to do the exact right thing, because you're not going to get that. But like, there's nothing wrong with being a casual player. I really hate elitist attitudes, so I'm explaining it in the context of why we won, not like why we were better, if that makes sense.
Anyway, that's that tangent done. Let's get back to 9TAC4 Keepstar, somewhat unrelated, but we've got SIGs in the north. What's going on?
That really had nothing to do with the SIGs in the north. I mean, it literally didn't. I was the one who pitched that. I pitched Hakkinen or Hakkonen, however you want to say it. I am extremely worried about Goons becoming Goons 2015, where we had won some victories the previous year, like in BTAC-R and other fights, and we'd won some wars, and then we just sat and rotted. And you had just there's nothing wrong with crabbing, but there is something wrong with doing 100% of it your time crabbing. And I think that not to get too corporate jingo Six Sigma, but I think you want to fail forward fast. I think you want to get stuck in situations where your chances of winning are low, but but the stakes are also low. So something like Hakkinen, where we deployed and just brought our capitals up and left our super capitals behind, we put ourselves in a situation where it was incredibly unlikely that we could win against the combined super forces of the North. But that experience that we took out of there was incredibly valuable. RFCs got experience, and the North got propaganda. They were just living it up on Reddit about how they were killing goons and how bad goons are, but they did it with supers and titans, and that was of no value to them, but it was of incredible value to us when we were in those Typhoon fleets fighting against supers and Macario fleets. Like, that kind of experience is extremely valuable. It also is good for your line members. Whereas if you're in the Titan and you're just turkey shooting, I don't think that makes you a better person or a better pilot, really. And you have something like that where the people in the North would go, where we would go to 9TAC4 and try to take down this Keepstar against the entire North. They would go and they would shoot Providence. And when we would go to Hakkinen, and with just our capitals and fight their super capital fleet, they would go and shoot Providence. And when you only take victories that are guaranteed, you become Goons 2015. You become rotten on the inside. And you saw it. Like, you saw it when we actually came with even numbers. Like, I have been pointing out that the Super and Titan numbers in X47 were 1% apart. It was the closest Super and Titan fight ever. And they had the advantage of tether. When you actually saw it come down to it, you saw that they had become rotten, and that all the experience that we have of putting ourselves into situations where we weren't likely to win had benefited us.
So the Typhoon fleet experience transferred to Titan piloting?
It transfers. No, it's not like you fly this Typhoon and you fly your Titan better.
So
but
fleet discipline.
Yeah, it transfers to
Okay.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Huh.
So we've got SIGs in the north. That all sort of dies down. In the timeline, working our way up to the war, which has just ended, so to speak. Where are we?
Where do you want to be? Like I think the war in the North proper started around early July. It was we weren't planning on doing that. Like we were planning on going to war, but in a month or two from now, actually, we had to borrow a
for a
Keepstar.
winter war, right?
Yeah, we had to borrow a Keepstar from one of our corps. We didn't have one already. Like the one we dropped was a borrowed Keepstar.
What was the event though that made you
Precipitating event.
jump in?
Yeah, it was PL going south. When they went south, the balance of power in the north changed to the point where it looked like it was about even. And so I talked to ProGod and Billy, and basically what we came up with was we're like, you guys in the south, Test and Legacy, you're going to lose. Like you're greatly outnumbered. There are a bunch of they have way more supers and titans than you do, and more just raw numbers. But can you guys fight a delaying action while we attack them in the north? And we have even numbers in the north, and we think we can push them. And to their credit, ProGod and Billy were 100% on board with that. Like they were willing to fight the losing action while we push them in the north. And the strategic goal was to draw PL back. Was like, if we can push them in the north, then PL will have to come home, and then Test has, or Legacy I should say, has evened out the numbers at that point. And I mean, now in retrospect that obviously it was PL was a paper tiger, and NC was also a paper tiger. But at the outset, we did not realize that. We thought that they were going to hit Test and Legacy really hard, and we thought that it would be really tough row to hoe in the north. And both of those, I don't want to minimize the work we put into it, but both of those ended up proving not to be true. When the rubber met the road, we won those battles pretty consistently.
So I wonder if the calculation was, hey, let's go up there and again clog their cannons with our bodies, like die a bunch, since we can reproduce our losses faster than they can. So it would be okay to do something like that. But then you ended up kind of winning the battles anyway.
Yeah, there was certainly the calculation that in the north, even though, so we thought we would be outnumbered in supers and titans, but we said if we lose like 1.3, 1.4 times the amount they do, we have the capacity to rebuild it. So if we rebuild it, we can replace it with a material faster than they can. So it doesn't matter if we lose. I mean, that had to be the calculation at the start, because you wouldn't have taken that fight otherwise. We thought at the time that we were going to be outnumbered. It turned out that was going to be even, basically, but we thought we'd be outnumbered in supers and titans in the north, and certainly in the south they were outnumbered in supers and titans. So from our perspective, it was kind of like another scenario like Hackney or 9-4, where we would be outnumbered, but we felt that we had built ourselves industrial capacity enough that we could, America in World War II, just make more Shermans.
Yeah, or at least test it out. Like, get those factories going, see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I just want to flip back just a second to the 9-4, because when that battle went down, right, that was still under the old mechanic of you can sit there and trebuchet fighters across, but still be tethered until they actually engaged, right? And then that got changed, and that whole thing got changed after that, right? Is that why we no longer really see kind of the trebuchet maneuver tactic as much now? And it basically just converted over to drop mound of Titans on field and basically dare a standoff on that.
Well, we did actually do that trebuchet or Skynet tactic for some of the Keepstars that we killed once they had broken, just because it's safer, and you don't have to have your Titans on the grid, where they can disconnect, which is the major concern. Yeah, so but it proved to be a non-starter as far as hitting a Keepstar under 6,000 people in the system.
Yep.
It would have worked if the servers had worked, but it didn't. And in January for the $1 million battle, we were not in the place to fight a Titan slugfest versus PL and NC. Like that was there was no way that would have worked. We had way less than they did then, and that's why when PL deployed, that's why it started looking like, hey, this is a fight we could take, because it made the numbers palatable to us. So it was never going to happen in 9TAC4. In that $1 million battle, article that ProGod wrote, at the time, tests were not our allies, and ProGod would have loved nothing more, and he said this, he would have loved nothing more than for the two of us groups to slug it out, because if PL had taken major losses, NC had taken major losses, and Goons had taken major losses, who's the only group left with Titans that didn't take any losses?
They're like pushing you to get into a war.
He literally said that was the point of him writing it, was to goad all of us into having a Titan fight, because it would have been good for his group.
Yeah, I remember him saying that. And that might have been because I think he also said, like, oops, I pissed off Matani more so than I meant to. So it might have been a way of saying, like, that's just the meta calculation I was making. So nothing personal.
Yeah, he went pretty hard at Mittens on that one. It was pretty funny.
Did. All right. Elise Randolph just joined us in perfect timing because we're talking about PL's move to the south to enter into the war. Elise, thanks for running home and getting on.
Yeah, no problem. Just a quick morning jog, something I constantly do every single day to stay in super shape.
You're so fit.
Yeah, obviously.
You can admit you were at church.
It was the Taylor Swift concert, I heard.
I actually did go to a Taylor Swift concert last month. It was kind of amazing. I know it sounds like a weird memey thing to do, but it was actually amazing. It was me, probably like 4 dads, and then just 40,000 women aged 8 to 60.
I was going to ask how many dads were in the audience.
There was a guy right behind me just wearing a Slayer shirt, and he just looked dead in his eyes. It was
what a hero.
That guy loves his children.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're just going over the actual like full length of the war with Asher, and one of the things that made really the northern campaign start was PL moving south to help. I guess it was Fraternity and Tri take on Test. Is there anything you can tell us now in retrospect about that?
Not so much really. It's just it's something that our campaign commanders kind of had been wanting to do, and it's something that we had been hearing Tess saying, "Oh, if you bring Super South, we're gonna go join Goons, and you're gonna be screwed forever," as if it were some sort of threat to us. We're just like, you know what? We might as well go south. We thought we had a pretty good thing going with Tri and Fraternity over there. They had some time zone coverage that was really nice. And so we decided to fight the Tappy guys, and we brought our supers with us this time.
It looked good on paper, and the one thing you couldn't break their counter escalation of supers, if I remember correctly. So it was, I think, Villy had beaten you guys pretty well, made a big video about it, or a video was made about it where he's saying like, this is where we fight kind of thing.
Yeah, it was to the point where it felt like every big timer we had, instead of just fighting in subcaps, the Tappy guys would escalate, which is totally fine. It's not like a cheap thing to do at all. I mean, I would have done it too if I were in their shoes, but we just had no answer for that. And the way we thought we might have had an answer for it, but they just had so many faxes, and the way faxes work, it was still a little bit daunting to try and break through it. So we're just like, you know what? We can bring our supers too and just see how this works. And then as soon as we did, they moved their supers like one midpoint back, and things kind of died down a little bit.
So you stepped at them, and they moved back.
Yeah, and then they made good on their promise to kind of make a good standing with the Imperium as well. So now they're buddies, which was incredibly. I don't know. I got a lot of joy out of that to hear ProGod just kind of retroactively calling the war that he was in before from World War B to the Casino War. Like it was just
so good.
It just made me laugh. I'm sure he did it on purpose and to meme as well, but it just made me laugh
That was funny.
When your old girlfriend starts dating the guy you don't like.
Yeah.
That was actually part of the agreement that he had to say that to invoke the Imperium getting involved.
Yeah.
There are some people complaining about the deal with GTG. They're like, we should have put in a clause there that all their members have to call it the Casino War.
Yeah, the Casino War clause. You guys, the Imperium should just roll through everywhere and just the surrender terms be, you guys got to call it the Casino War now. That's it. That's the only thing you have to do.
Yeah.
That's funny because there was a commission after, I'll use the title that the commission wanted to call it World War B. There was a World War B commission, and they brought these people in from media, and they had an artist in there, and it was all the guys that you would think were supposed to be in there, including Lenny and everybody else. And they're like, this is going to be the World War B war, and we got to like memorialize it and all this other stuff. And I was like, hey, I'm in here, but I'm not sanctifying that name. Like, that's not a name that's not contested kind of thing. And it was ProGod that said, like, nobody else calls it anything else. That's the name of the war. Like, who could say that? And then, yeah, so we went on from there. So he was very much in that corner. So to hear him say the Casino War, it was like pretty funny.
ProGod's one of those guys whose passions burn hot. You know, you're not going to get a reasoned point of view from ProGod. You're going to get what he is feeling right now.
I mean, it was pretty quick though, from the announcement that PL was deploying their super capital fleet south. That the answer was, and the Imperium is going, you know, and the Imperium is going to get in. So I mean, it was less than a week, I think, right before the announcement happened.
Yeah, I mean, we had heard, you know, maybe 3 or 4 days before they went that it was going to happen, right? So, or some amount of time before. I don't remember the exact timeline, but we'd had a little time to discuss it even before it happened, and so we had already had a plan. We had a meeting, and we're like, what will we do if they do move? And so we waited to see, you know, we watched the move up that weekend, I think. And you know, once we saw them start moving the actual Supers and Titans, like, oh, as soon as they hit Tino, it was like go time. All right, they're going south. Let's get ready to go north.
Yeah, we were kind of hoping that it would cause some sort of stir, and we weren't exactly sure how it was going to play out. A lot of people were like, oh, if you go south, then the goons will just move everything south and they'll fight over.
Right. That would have been the most boring way to do
Yeah,
it.
it would have been terrible.
Yeah, that would have been horrible.
There were a lot of people who wanted to do that. I was really opposed to that. Like, and I think it worked out well, obviously, the way we did it. But that would have been just the end of fights if that had happened, because you know, goons and test versus just PL and Skill U and Frat, like that's not an even fight in any way.
Yeah, that was a great decision at the time. You know, there were people out there, you know, I think who were thinking, oh, let's just go and do the old single point in space kind of thing. And I'm like, oh my God, can you imagine how miserable this is going to be?
Well, it's, you know, it's the thing was, like I was saying before Elise got here, the way it ended up being, you know, the numbers for a war were especially like a galactic war, were very evenly matched, you know, overall. So it was, in the north, you had pretty much even Supers and Titans, and then the northern forces had more subs than us. And in the south, you had, you know, the PL Skill U guys. They had a lot more Supers and Titans, but they had less subs. So the balance was slightly adjusted on each side, but it was for a war this big, the numbers were surprisingly close.
Yeah, there's like a lot of herf blurf that like, oh, the goon tappy union is too strong, it's gonna just dominate everything. But I was like, yeah, the numbers, like you were saying, aren't that like skewed one way or another.
It's weird. I'm already seeing like some revisionism from the north about how goons just blobbed in the north, and like that's why we had such a hard time bringing iHubs, was because we just had less subs. Like there was, you know, it was a total role reversal where it used to be like goons had way more subs, but then, you know, you'd have like NCPL drop Supers and Titans on us because we couldn't match that escalation. And we were like, man, if we could just break this iHub, we could drop Supers and Titans on them, right? Like, so it was a weird scenario. I mean, by the time we were trying to break the iHubs, the North, it seemed to us, had pretty much decided not to fight more Super and Titan fights. So even though the numbers were close, that became less of a concern. But so we had a real hard time breaking those IHUBs because of the sub advantage that they had. So it was definitely. I'm interested to see how like it became that we blobbed them, or it's becoming that way, and I'll probably try to push back against that.
Yeah, a lot of that it just comes from the front, because I've been in that position before where people are just like, you're blobbing me. It just feels super helpless when you get a bunch of supers and titans and faxes dropped on you and you can't do anything and you've got to like move around. But people that have been on the other side of that shoe, you'd think they'd have a little bit more empathy for that position, because there are lots of challenges when you only have a massive super fleet or super and titan fleet.
I think
you can't really move around. You've got to hold this one position really, really well, and God forbid they move the fight to another grid. Oh God.
Yeah, I think at least part of the problem is that even though someone in like GTG has historically been aligned with what we're calling the North now, they've historically been aligned with NCPL for a number of years, right? They have never got the feeling that they have this invincible force behind them, even though they're aligned with it. To them, it doesn't, like, they don't have that mental feeling. So when they say that we got blobbed, that's what they feel, because GOTG, like they're speaking from their perspective. Like, yeah, GTG was blobbed out, and then we couldn't drop supers and titans because Vince didn't want to do it anymore, right? So it's a legit feeling. It's just not factual from my perspective. But I understand where they're coming from.
And 6 months ago, they were getting shot by PL too. So
yeah.
Also, that's what happens when you tell everybody to trade in their Pinto for a Cadillac. Asher, when
you just get a fleet of Cadillacs.
You get a fleet of Cadillacs. You got a bunch of Titans.
I understand. It was a weird scenario where I was like, I wish we had less Titans, or less Titans and more supers. Like, I've never said that before.
It's been 13 years, but Goons finally got a super fleet, and they finally got FCs to run it. A little bit behind everyone, but at least you guys did it in style.
Hey, it doesn't matter. I want to be the last of the party. That's what I said. That's why I was mad that you came later than me.
Yeah.
I showed up 5 minutes late, and here you're walking in the door 50 minutes late, just showing me up again.
To be fair, my 50 minutes late in my head was 10 minutes early.
Yeah, that's true. We got confused on the time. I got confused on the time, so I expected him early. But we're glad he's here now. So back to the story. PL comes down south. Did Test come over to Imperium and say, hey, let's partner up finally? Make me a legitimate alliance?
Got to put a ring on it. I don't remember. I mean, I know Elise knows this. When you're in FC, like, you end up talking to other FCs, just casually, like, oh, what happened here? Except maybe the ones that you just really dislike. But like someone like Billy is not someone who most people dislike. They dislike losing to him, right? But he's not a very dislikable person. He's sort of a vanilla Billy. So I just chat with Billy every now and again, and I imagine it came out of that, but I don't remember the exact details of how it came about. It seems like it was so it made so much sense that that they ended up it just happened. I can't remember the details.
Yeah, and that's an unfair question when FC was worried about other things, not who approached who, or maybe you're just trying to hide something, but I don't know why you would. Okay, but anyway, Test and Goonswarm do very quickly basically become Imperial Legacy, which becomes a bigger coalition. Yeah, so Imperial Legacy is formed pretty much the day after PL decides to go south. And you guys really quickly go up north. You mobilize super fast. What was that like?
Well, like I said, we were preparing for it before, like, it was officially announced that PL was going south. But I really hated our slow rollouts before, so I was just like, let's go ahead and push it. And so we did, and we got a pretty good deploy. Like, all things considered, that we were running around behind the scenes borrowing a Keepstar and just utterly unprepared for it for this time frame. So we got up north, and I would say our initial deploy was probably 60% of the Supers and Titans we would end up fielding. If NC and the North had attacked the Keepstar we anchored, they could have easily killed it, and they probably would have easily won any kind of super Titan fight on that Keep Star. But because they gave us time to bring up just reinforcement fleets every day, we brought up enough numbers that we eventually brought it up to even by the time we were in X47. So I would say that it worked, but it did put us in a position of risk. And I'm thankful that NC was too much of a person who was afraid of things to come and fight on that Keep Star. Because had they done so, it would have been really bad for us.
Who was that person afraid to fight for things?
Well, I mean, Vince Drakens is the one who was running the Northern campaign, so I wasn't in their comms when they were making decisions, but I'm just going to give him the credit. You're the leader, you get the credit. So Vince Draken was the person who was too much afraid of things to come and fight in that Keep Star.
Oh, are we talking about the 6RCQ when that?
Yeah, the one we deployed. The one we deployed. Yeah, 6RC. Now, I mean, the thing is, like, I understand, like, it's a really hard call to make. It's a hard call to make because he knew that eventually we were going to have to hit his Keep Stars, and it is such a huge advantage to have tether. It's such a huge advantage. So and he was in his mind, I'm sure he was thinking, hey, they're going to have to fight us on the armor timer where the Keep Star can't die. So where I always will have tether, and so it's such a big advantage. Do I want to give that up? So I understand why he made that decision. It turned out to be the wrong one.
Maybe he thought it would be good to have you in the neighborhood, so there would be a bigger fight. Like, I don't know.
I mean, the other thing is, like, he was a mid away, a mid and a jump away from us, and so the same applied to us when we attacked, his Keep Star, was that he got to see all of our forces before he showed his, which is a big advantage. I mean, like I said, I get it, but if he had attacked then, he would have won, I think.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure over the years that Vince Dragon has played EVE Online, there have been many adjectives thrown his way, and coward is not one of them.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but it's like things change because it here it was, like he.
Well, yeah,
that was the case here.
I'm not going to sit there and say he was a coward because I don't think we need to say that about other people in the game. However, I do want to kind of ask the question. When somebody drops a staging Keep Star at your front door, you've got to be able to do something more than Gila's, right?
It sends a terrible message to your guys. Like, the way that they handled the morale side of this was bad from the start. And, like, I was talking about when SIGs and squads were deployed and putting, Asterhus on the Keep Star, the staging Keep Star. But when we were deployed, when the whole war was going on, we were doing it to their staging Keep Star when NC was there, and there would be days we'd drop an Aster House, we'd anchor it, and it wouldn't get refed for like 4 days. Like, how do you let that happen in your staging system? If there was an Aster House in my staging system that was unrefed, I would flip out. I'd be like, why hasn't the FC just gone out and shot this thing? They're two mids away or 1 mid away. I mean, the morale aspect was horribly handled, and that was part of it. Like, the fact that they let us anchor it with such a token resistance, it started the war off on a great foot for us and a terrible messaging for them.
I wouldn't call it a token resistance. Like, the way that it was messaged to us, and I can't say that this was true for the entire rest of the North, was that they looked at it. Imperial Legacy had more supers and Titans, so they were going to do the feed to win, which was done back when the drone regions were being invaded to kill Keep Stars there, which is you just drop pockets of dreads and you keep losing dreads and subcaps until the Keep Star eventually dies. But that Imperial Legacy had enough subs and enough coordination with those subs to prevent it from happening. So the way it was communicated to us, and the way it certainly seems to me still, is it was not a token effort. It just wasn't drop supers as a solution. It was feed to win as a solution that just didn't work.
I just look at the 6RCQ forward staging Keep Star that Imperium dropped up there, and the battle that ensued over it anchoring, right? And then you look at what happened down in, I'm going to forget the name of the system down there where the big hell camp ended up, UALX, where it was like, okay, and here is, PL and the gang kind of, jumping in to take down this Keep Star. And I don't even think that one was as consequential as far as a forward staging Keep Star was as what 6RCQ meant for the potential of ramming it down the north.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot fault PL. Like when they started signing in UALX, I was like, wow, these guys are really putting it on the table. So that's something where they showed real grit. But as to your point about the messaging in the north, like that might be good messaging to sort of to cover up, but Vince knows the numbers. Like he knew that wasn't true, so he was making a bad decision even if he had a sort of a cover up messaging for it. In the south, when Test went in, when PL went in against Test and Legacy, and Scale Yourself and Try, I don't want to minimize them, that showed a lot of grit, even though, I mean, they had better numbers, but putting yourself onto a Keepstar grid that's not yours and giving your enemy tether is really, really, really gutsy.
Yeah, in that fight, it was literally just a judgment call in terms of what we had going in. And we knew that you guys were coming with your shield supers, but we also knew that you were still a little bit ways away. So we figured that we could get a little bit more accomplished before you guys actually made it to the grid. And so I think we killed like 2 rags or something before you made it to the grid, even though it took you guys something like 4 or 6 hours to make it, just because there was like this horde interdiction fleet keeping.
I think you're confusing our armor fleet with our shield fleet. Our shield fleet was mostly already there.
The ones that were coming in. Yeah.
That was our armor fleet that was coming down.
Sorry. But yeah,
that was basically a race to the bottom. We were just like, man, if we don't start moving our armor fleet and NC does, we're gonna get killed. So we have to do it. It was one of those things where if there was someone I could have called and said, hey, let's just leave both the fleets on the north there, I would have done that because it would have been better for everyone. But you couldn't do that because if you were the one who elected not to, and they did, then you are the idiot.
Yeah, for sure.
So
that one came out to be pretty much a draw as well, like more or less. And what I thought was pretty good from the Tappy side is even though their side kind of took it on the chin. I mean, obviously their overall side kind of not quite won because they lost to Keepstar, but they didn't feel too bad. The Imperial Legacy's side wasn't bad at all. But I like that they just dropped the Keepstar there again, like the next day, or another maybe it was a fort the next day, like on the same grid.
Well, they dropped the fort over the Hell Camp, and then they dropped another Keepstar off of that.
Yeah.
Well, this was right after the Phoebe restrictions on travel had been reduced. Did that make any kind of a difference?
Hell yeah.
Yeah, that's the only way it was possible.
During that UALX, when the ping came out to move the armor fleet from the north and come around the Horn, there's no way that could have happened before those fatigue changes went into effect.
Yeah, Turk's totally right.
The jump changes are like they're just the light years around the south are just completely awful.
Or the south is really spread out.
The call for NC Dot to come and support too, because remember they were on the way too. It was like a race. It was a race from that general area around both sides of Eve.
That's kind of why I disagree with you, Dirk, about how UALX wasn't strategic. I think PL and Elise, they realized how strategic it was because they're it's not like the drone lands where everything's on top of each other. The geography matters a lot in the south, and UALX was the crossroads. And up until that point, Test had to mid to get to anything PL was doing, and PL like assiduously avoided going anywhere where Test didn't have to mid. So they would always be able to see, when we put our supers on grid, we have a mid's worth of notice before Test gets there, and that lets us see what they're forming. It gives us a 5-minute grace period, and once that Keepstar went up, and this was the whole reason they dropped it, was once that Keepstar went up, then Test could just undock and jump directly onto PL, and that is a scary situation to be in as an FC. Like it's like Schrodinger's Titan fleet. It's much better once you've actually looked at it.
Oh, that's an interesting point. That mid was crucial.
I guess I was saying that it wasn't as strategic because that down there, I mean, that was kind of that was an area of operations by choice for them. Like PL was down there doing their thing. Like it wasn't defense of the homeland, whereas the Keepstar that got deployed to 6RCQ was a gateway into their backyard.
Oh yeah, and I think we were making noise at the time, like we'll just drop a bunch of these, but we actually only had one. So if they had killed it, it just shuts down our northern deployment. Like that's it. So, GG deployment over.
Oh wow! In retrospect, it's very interesting the stakes. But also, didn't try intercept test when they were using a midpoint to get someplace at one point. I might be imagining that, or they. I might be confusing it with when the ex-death people were getting killed and or drone region Federation people were getting killed. And
I mean, it's
tested. Test,
but
midway
test were having, they didn't feed as nearly as horribly as when X-Death got caught out and used the wrong midpoints. But tests were having a pretty rough time in the south, just moving around. Because something that PL, Try, and Skill Yourself, all those people have a very similar play style, and it's very good at harassing people as they move around, right? So as Tess would try to move around, if they had to go 1 or 2 mid slots, they would have their fleet picked apart almost every time they were moving.
Yep.
And
that's why that keep start was really important.
Yeah, and for the longest time, or not the longest time, but for the initial stages of that fight, we had considered the prospects that, well, perhaps this entire war is going to turn into who can burn whose allies faster, right? So maybe PL and Stutch in the south just ravaging on test would be keep the same pace as Goons and Co. Just destroying the GOTG guys in the north.
Oh yeah, it was definitely a race. It was definitely like race to the coast at that point, like to see if the south could win before the northern attack could do damage. Like that was we were kind of discussing that before we got here, how Villy, PGLI, we were all talking, and Jay, we were talking about how what we needed Legacy to do in the south was lose slowly. Just fight over every inch of ground and give it up slowly. And if you can do that, that gives time to do work in the north. And if we start hitting the north and really threatening it, then PL will have to return to defend it. So that was the initial plan. Obviously, once we started just winning outright, then things changed. But that was where we were going from the start.
Yeah, same on our side. Like we were seriously considering that would be one of the avenues, or one of the main avenues it would have taken. And it's kind of funny because we've been literally in that position before while we were trying to fight AAA like years and years ago. We were in drone lands just burning their allies, and we were seeing how fast the AAA guys would be doing their thing. And sadly, AAA won on that one. But it's interesting how after the game changes dramatically and the players change dramatically, a lot of the tactics remain the same.
Well, what was the term that was being used back then? I mean, basically it was base war or something like that, which I think comes from another game that I don't play.
Base race?
Base race.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's very much a base race, which is something that comes from like MOBAs and shit like that. But it's a fun, like a mental exercise to see, and it's actually quite cathartic for both sides. Like, I am burning this, I am burning that over there. Like, who's winning? So those wars are always pretty fun for everyone, with the exception of the people whose homelands are getting burned.
The stars really aligned for this war, and that both sides thought they could win, and that's that's a really vital component of having people. Having people commit to a war, and this one, both sides thought they could win.
I think so too. I think you saw that when PL. I think the moment of truth was UALX when PL did go in. Then I really thought like, oh, this is actually going to happen. Because I thought 9-Tech-4 wasn't a true sign of what could happen. It was more the UALX who was actually going to commit to a fight that could actually be lost. But anyway, you were saying, Elise.
Oh, I was saying that's absolutely true. Like the one knock to EVE Online is that the people involved that run the fleets, the Ashers and the Jays of the world, they're not dumb. Which in other games, like sometimes the people, they just want to have fun. They just want to goof around. They don't really think the consequences. But the FCs and the leaders in EVE Online aren't dumb, and they don't want to take like a losing fight. Like they just don't want to do stuff to lose.
Those FCs existed. I mean, that's I was talking about sort of how the game evolves and evolution like weeds out the people who are bad at it and like not playing optimally, and those people are in FCON or were in FCON, and now they're a junior skirmish FC in a relevant alliance, but they don't get to do that anymore because they have shown their quality.
But like the whole thing of like nobody wants to lose. So in a thing like this, the only time you can get consistent fights and big slugfests is when both sides just are like, yeah, we could do this. Like this is not an easy win, but this is like a 50-50 call, maybe 55-45, and they just misgauge the ratios a little bit and think it's on their side and they go in.
That's what's required is both sides need to think that they are the 55 and the other side's the 45.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's awesome.
After UALX and whatever you want to call it, I'm just going to call it the Hell Camp, but what really happened down there subsequent to that, as far as not just PL, but the other super capital people that were involved with that? I mean, did that ever become a thing again?
I think so. Around that time, after that, we got our supers out. Everyone got their supers out. Fraternity, I think, lost 2 on the way out. But everyone got extracted within 4 or 5 days. And Test kind of pulled back a lot of their forces. Maybe I'm horribly wrong here, but I was there, so I don't think I am. But they pulled back their forces, and they made it clear that they're not going to fight over certain things. We burned down like 6 Fortizars completely uncontested. And then at that point, we decided, you know what, it looks like this is just going to be on one front, so we're just going to go give our guys in the north a little bit more support, give them a little shot in the arm. Maybe that'll change the dynamic a little bit.
Right. So moving on, we move to the you guys come up north and you start having successes. Asher, what happened after UALX? What was the big thing that made you guys realize, you know what, let's actually line them up and take them out? Keep stars.
I wouldn't. I mean, it's like now, Goons killed like 10 keep stars or whatever it was, right? Like that wasn't the plan initially. The plan was, let's go for 1 and let's try and take it down. And like, so before the X47 armor timer, man, I cannot tell you how nervous I was because, I don't think there'd ever been a fight of that size committed to on an enemy keep star. Like UALX was big, but the relative super fleets were smaller, right? So
and there was time zone. I mean, sorry, the what do they call it? The timer was going to run out on you guys.
Yeah, right. It was they had time zone tanked to Australian time zone, so we had to force the timer. So it was I don't think I slept that night really. And it was also, it started earlier, which is a major concern because if once we were on that grid, we weren't leaving until downtime if they wanted to hold us there. And so it started relatively early EU, whereas the test timer started in US time zone. So you have just many extra hours to lose if you mess up. So we had to feel pretty confident in our strategy. And so when we were discussing using the supers like jump hectors to sort of get around their tether advantage, which is a huge advantage, we had noted never been done before. Like that was a level of commitment that had never been done in EVE Online. And putting that much stuff right on top of their super fleet, right on top of their keep star, right on top of their Titans was really unusual. But it was something that they didn't expect, but we thought, and turned out that was true. And it was something that would give us an advantage that would sort of nullify their the tether advantage. And you saw it. I think we started out losing 6 Titans to their 1. And it continued to pace at that until we were able to pull it back. And I think we ended up being 29-27 in that one. So we pulled it out, but we pulled it out at the very end. So it was hard fought. And I was physically and mentally exhausted afterwards. Brizzle came on in, excuse me, in US time zone. And he took over calling targets for me. And I was just so grateful because I cannot tell you at that point how I was just wiped out. So when we made that decision to go for the armor timer, it was just take it 1 timer at a time. And once we did the armor timer, we had a plan, like a separate plan for the hull timer. And we thought they would, anticipate we would do the same strategy again, and we didn't. So that worked out well because Kill Bee said afterwards that they thought we'd do a similar thing. And once that blew up, then it's like, all right, what's our stretch goals here? Where do we go from here? And it turned out that after that fight, in retrospect, they lost the appetite for using their supers and titans in a decisive engagement. But we still had to be on the lookout for them logging on, and it wasn't like we had carte blanche because we didn't know what their attitude was. It's just in retrospect that you see that.
Right.
Now, and when you have a slight advantage in any type of engagement in EVE Online, be it like a small fight or a big fight, you want to push as much as you could in that. Once you have just a little bit of swagger, you want to just keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it.
Yeah, just wedge that into the crack and try to split it open.
Now, one of the other defining things that happened up there, right, was basically you may have this giant supercap steamroller that's sitting there, right, but then oh my God, jammed in iHubs, right? So you had to move into a different phase that was, well, if we want to get to these things, we're going to have to go through Aegis Sovereignty to get there.
Yeah. I had to briefly translate what Aegis Sovereignty meant in my head, but
I'm trying to be the kinder, nicer, not named devs.
Better known as Fozzie Sov.
Yeah. And then that, like I was saying, that's the point where they had the sub advantage. We couldn't use capitals at all, and it took us a while for it to work. And thank goodness CO2 controlled those iHubs, because I feel like if NC Dot had it, we'd maybe still be going at it right now. It was one of those things where I keep talking about the lessons we learned and applying them. And that was a lesson that they thankfully drove home over and over again in the Casino War, where we had too many alliances owning too much space and not a centralized control and command method. And the fact that we learned that lesson and they didn't take it to heart, because it wasn't just pounded in their head every single time they undocked, worked to our advantage this time. I wonder if the next time it will be the same way, or if they will learn from this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to a comment that was made out there, which is a comment that is made in general out there. Fozzie Sov, Aegis Sovereignty, whatever you want to call it, is crap, right? But when you look at what was going on up here at this, up in the north at that time, the jamming of systems and the need to use this other mechanic.
It's don't try and justify it.
No, I'm not trying to justify necessarily the mechanic, but I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what might this have been if it was easier to just go through? I mean, because again, when we're in this age of Titans being a primary attack weapon out there, not just a strategic asset, but really the heavy punch and the I dare you to come at it. That steamroller just would have steamrolled. And I don't know. I feel as though there almost needs to be something that kind of offsets that by saying, well, you can either Titan, go by gate, or you've got to go and take out these other things.
I mean, from a game balance perspective, I see your point. I don't know if it's valid or not. It might be. But I can tell you that I have never had a Fozzie Sov experience I enjoyed.
No.
It doesn't matter. Winning, losing. Like, every time I'm done with Fozzie Sov, I go, I don't want to do that again. I hated that. And
I absolutely agree with you on the Fozzie Sov side of things, other than the fact that is what we have right now. But looking into the future, right, where these things like jammers and whatnot are going to be replaced.
Well, I mean, they're going to come out with a new jammer.
A different game mechanic, okay, a different method by which certain things are attacked is not necessarily a bad thing. Otherwise, you just end up with, in a way, what we ended up with Dominion Sovereignty, which was just jump everything on target, boom, boom, boom.
Which I thought was a better way to do it. Like, I'm not one of those people who's like, we need to spread the fights around. Like, that's that is not a fun way to play EVE as far as I'm concerned. Like, I like to see this giant ball of many fleets rotating around each other in slow motion. Like, that's a fun way to fight. Now, I don't want every fight to be a tie-dye 10% fest, but I think that they are fun. And the problem with Fozzie Sov is it doesn't accomplish what it is intended to accomplish. People still get, they just get in that ball and fight in one of those systems, and then the winner gets to win like 2 hours of super annoyance while they fly around in claw fleets and shoot your Entosis ships. Like that's your winning victory, is that you have to do work. And so it used to be if you won, you would just be on the grid and you would shoot whatever it is, the station, and flip it. But now you have to just do extra work. It's like getting homework after acing the test.
So anticlimactic.
Going
Well,
back,
I'd push back on that point and say that it is not you have more homework after you've won, it's that there are more opportunities for you to lose. Right, sure, it is the case that in this particular war, in these particular engagements, you would win and then have to do the Entosis. But in other scenarios, it is very much the case that the fight is over the Entosis itself. It's not just claws roaming around.
So you're saying that your favorite part of hooking up with a beautiful girl is the
Meeting
herpes
the
test a
parents.
week later?
I would say that a week later isn't necessarily herpes.
Okay, let's get off this topic.
I was just I wanted to go back to what Asher was mentioning in regards to like ownership of the solve things, and I think the big picture here is just the way the two different groups are formed, right? So the people in the north, they don't necessarily consider themselves a coalition, right? It's Guardians of the Galaxy, which is a coalition. It's got CO2, who is trying to rebuild itself, who is just chilling in the north and wanting to fight, and then NCPL. I think between NCPL, if those two were fighting, the iHubs would be kind of very well managed. I think if only Guardians of the Galaxy were to get fought or to get attacked, those would be really well managed. But you understand, like, because you've literally been in the position before, you were saying it, when you have a coalition of people who haven't really been attacked so much, or haven't really had the need to have a centralized iHub type thing, people get a lot of, I don't know, they have a good feeling. They feel like they belong as like a member of the coalition when they can see that little iHub or that little structure belongs with their little flag running in it, So FCON owning a bunch of structures instead of Goonfleet makes it seem like FCON is a relevant member of the coalition,
Right. I mean, right. It's like when you give your kid little Spider-Man jammies and he feels like a superhero.
Dude, I've got penguin pajamas and they're the best things in the world.
I believe you. I'm just saying you wouldn't want to have them crawl any walls, if you're wearing them.
Or outside the
I'm
building.
just saying the north, the coalition that's in the north isn't really a true coalition, and this isn't like revisionist history or anything like that. It's literally Guardians of the Galaxy and PLNC and then other dudes who decided to just like, when the oncoming storm was coming, they're like, oh shit, let's be friends. Even though we're all loosely friends anyways, because we've got mutual interests in there. I think the thing is that it's not a coalition, it's just a lot of mutually held interests.
Oh, I agree with that. I mean, that was clear, that the command and control structure was not what you want it to be. And you've seen people all throughout the north. I mean, I've seen people from all sides of the north saying, hey, one of the big reasons that we lost was that our command structure was really poor and there was infighting, and maybe what you guys need to do is you need to have like a Roman situation where you appoint someone dictator for the year, and then they're going to make all the calls and everyone has to agree with them. But could you have gotten CO2 to agree with that? I don't think so, unless GigX was the one you chose, and that would be really hilarious. Please do that next time.
I'm going to transfer all of the iHubs to GigX and see what happens.
It's such a good idea.
But yeah, I think NC would have to play that role, because PL, I don't know, I think after like 4 months we'd be like, wow, this sucks. I want to kill our friends, and then just reset them, and then things would be catastrophic. We're not really situated to playing well with others for extended periods of time.
Yeah. You certainly see NC evolving into the more modern sort of type alliance, and I mean, I think that's why NC is going to come out of this the best of any of the groups, because they will be the ones who are adapted. I mean, I'm not trying to throw shade at you specifically, Elise, but I don't think PL is going to adapt very well, and I don't think PL will survive as a relevant group in 2 or 3 years. I think they'll be sort of a memory, and they'll be like Tuskers. They'll be like dudes who have a good reputation, but you aren't like worried, oh, Tuskers showed up to the fight. Like that's not a big concern, and that's what I think is sort of PL's future is, maybe friends, people who have fun playing, but as a relevant person in the metagame, probably no longer relevant.
I don't think PL has ever been that relevant in the metagame, with the exception of there's been like a few times where like PL is, because PL in terms of size has been about 500 real players for the last 8 years or so. And in terms, when you're talking about these huge coalition fests and these huge mashups of people, throwing 500 real people as a delta, I don't think does too much. Where we did have a huge advantage was when people didn't have super fleets.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about 500 people with 100 Titans, like that's
when we were a super fleet that you could just rent for a few weeks to give your side, that delta of extra supers, it was a massive advantage, right? But in terms of being the front end of the spear, like PL has never been really good at that, and I don't think PL would ever be really good. But I agree with you that NC is going to come out becoming more of a what people would consider a proper alliance. PL, we made the decision to, instead of grow large, we kind of want to stay meddling to try out how that would work. I think we're reevaluating a little bit about how we want to be size-wise, or what we want to do like objective-wise. But I wouldn't go as far to say we're going to be Tuskers next week. But,
well, I wouldn't say next week either. I'm just sort of, you know what, like I do have a problem when people like come in with a projection chart and it's like, oh, we made we increased our profits 150%, and if you extrapolate that every year, 150% growth in 20 years, we're going to be bigger than Google. Like, that's such a yeah. So I don't want to be the person who is demise casting you guys just because of like a negative delta, like you said. But I mean, to be honest, I have way more fun with Reavers than I do with main fleet. It's just because hanging out with 60 people and a lot of them who you know pretty well, and you have little jokes about them. Like if I'm in a fleet with 1,000 people in comms, first off, there's 100 people who only want to hear align here, do this, shoot this. Like they don't want to hear anything else. And if you start talking, they're going to start complaining because they're trying to watch Netflix at the time, right? And then there's 900 other people who I don't really know very well, and so you can't really have like a relationship with them. But with 60 people, it's like it's like a big classroom or something. It's something where you can still have relationships with the people, and it's not unwieldy. So I don't begrudge PL at all. I think they're probably putting themselves in a position to have the most amount of fun that they can.
So PL knows, so we know what we are, which is kind of I guess the main thing, right? So other people may not, like I know you know what we are too, but other people may not. They may think we want to be these big Sov owning, mega coalition leading type dudes. In reality, it's just a bunch of people, like the demographic of PL are veteran players who are bored doing the big fleet fights or bored doing certain things. So they want to be able to do more finesse type things, even though we always continually fail at trying to do that type of thing. But we keep trying at least. So we want to do these like small finesse type things, these harassment campaigns. Essentially, what Reavers do, or what like SIGs do, would be in like a group like Goonswarm.
You probably do it too well. Like you are the parasites that kill the host kind of thing, or the virus.
PL has always been in really good position when there's an alliance that's just on the fringe of killing itself, and we just give it that little pushover. So I think that's going to be the role that we continue to play, rather than as EVE evolves to become like a mega group versus mega group. I think we're going to not go the mega group direction. But we will still be friends with NC, who have taken up that mantle of being like the antithesis to the Goonswarm type thing,
I think the only way to have fun in EVE, or the best way to have fun in EVE, is to put yourself in a position to lose. And when I deploy Reavers, I don't ever take supers. I mean, I take a Titan to bridge or whatever, but I don't bring a super force. And I think that it's one of those things where if you have the capability to have an I win button, you will never have as much fun as when you force yourself into positions where you have to figure out how to attempt to win in scenarios where you can lose. And so like when we went to Hackanen and we were greatly outnumbered, that was a lot of fun because we just spent time trying to figure out how could we win against these greater numbers. And it turned out we didn't win, but a lot of us. Yeah, I mean that it's cliche, but yes, a lot of people had fun. And if you ask goons that have been around for the last 3 years, or more, what is your favorite time? Saarinen will almost always be what they say, because you could undock, get a fight immediately. You were outnumbered. You were fighting in hurricanes. You were trying to take out an IS victory against a much superior force. And they'll go, it won't be like, oh, that time we killed like 20-1 Titans or 18-1 Titans in the X-47 whole timer. Like, that's not as common. It's the ability to lose. And I think that's probably at least like what, if I was just giving you unsolicited advice, I would say, leave the supers, leave the Titans, sometimes leave the caps, and put yourself in a place where find someone where you can have a chance to lose, but that you can work out. And I think that's probably part of the problem for PL, is that they have a reputation to keep. Like, if someone posts negatively about me on Reddit, I don't care. It's not going to hurt my feelings because I know who I am. But I feel like PL, and this might be just straight from the outside, and it could be totally wrong. I feel like PL members have some sort of like level of expectation of that they're not going to get that. And I think if you were going to change your alliance in any way, it would be to get rid of that attitude and get yourself stuck in where you have a shot at losing.
I think if people cared about what they read on Reddit, I think poor Headliner would just never want to log in again.
Yeah, Headliner is
poor dude who does so much. It just constantly gets shit on. But yeah, so the interesting thing about Reddit is the minute you fight test ever, the tide on Reddit always goes against you, which is, I think, something that everyone kind of accepts at this point.
That was one of the things, man, when Scion in 2015 said like Reddit isn't a community, I just facepalmed. I literally facepalmed so hard. Like, it just reminded me so much of there are no goons. And like, when I was I was one of like 3 goons on Reddit in 2013. I was the voice in the wilderness, and it was like every post I would make would get downvoted. But you could tell it was the future of getting your message out. And obviously we've adapted to it now towards the point where there are a lot of goons on the Eve Reddit, but it took us a long time to get there. And it'll probably change again. It'll probably be, pretty soon I'll have to be posting like hot selfies of me on Snapchat to get my message out, but it's not there yet.
I want to say I was editor at the time in defense of Scion. The idea that he had was that he was going to make people pick sides. So you would either come to the defense of goons, or you would be a critic. And so he was trying to split that. At least that was the plan I understood after.
But can I choose to hate everyone? Like, I feel like this should be an option.
Maybe.
But yes, I understood. Like, the whole Viceroy program was a response to rot. Like I said, in 2015, goons were rotten, and we had a scenario where we didn't have anyone to fight, and we were unable or unwilling to leave our home. And at the time, I had no pull. So if I was running things at the time, I would have made us do something. But like, the idea was, or at least I would have attempted to get Matani to approve it. I don't want to make it seem like I snapped my fingers and there we go. But they were trying to just piss off enough people that they would come and fight us. And to the credit, it did work, just not in the way we wanted it to work.
It did eventually work really, really well, like a super effective strategy.
It just brought 60,000 people to our doorstep.
Yeah, it just worked for the other people.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, getting back to this war, the opposite has happened. We've come to a place where you guys risked a lot, Asher did, with not knowing what the results were going to be, and it paid off. And so did you feel at a certain point you started gaining momentum that couldn't be stopped or something like that?
Personally, no. I'm still worried about losing this war at this point. Like, I don't ever feel good when we win, but I feel awful when we lose. So I'm strongly motivated not to lose. And like, once we are back in Delve, I'll probably sit back and take a few minutes to feel a little self-satisfied. But I think part of being good at this is always considering what could go wrong, not what could go right. There are people like DBRB and PGL who they only see their name in lights, and like they've got, oh, this is how I'm going to win, this is how I'm going to destroy, this is how I'm going to crush. And those people are good for the game, but it's probably why I wouldn't want DBRB or PGL to be in charge of my super fleet, but I would want them to be in charge of my battleship fleet, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, and, historically that checks out.
Yeah, that checks with the facts. But so you basically went through a time where you were Sino jammed out. Then came CSM, or maybe before that, and something about GigX's wife getting banned.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I think that I think the operations to go after the Sino jammers and things like that had already begun, right? I mean, the path was already being set. The ground war was in effect there before.
They had already claimed an entire constellation, had they not, before the CSM summit?
Yeah. Like that I don't know if that's going to be like a talking point. I know CO2 has been trying to push it, like their members, and it's been a talking point for them. Like the GSM got GigX banned, and that's why we lost. But I think that is a after the fact
it's not how it works.
justification.
Okay. Well, it just seemed to coincide, though. But at that point, you guys really went on a roll. You lined up 4 or 5 keep stars at the same time, including the South. And you guys just took them down 1, 2, 3 after. And that was just that was a week ago.
Yeah. It was a, hey, Dolphins got an interception. It was a thing where basically what happened was I think CO2 forgot to online a new Sino jammer on one of their systems when we were fighting over one of the iHubs, and that let us get in. And we broke one iHub, and at that point we can access the constellation. And once we can access the constellation, it just fell apart for them from there. They couldn't have a single breach in the wall, and once they did, we were the barbarians were through the gates at that point. And that's where you had the quick fall of their Sino jam protections, and DW TAC-D lost it, then DO6H lost it, and at that point, once they showed that they weren't willing to commit to an open Titan super fight, that was sort of the end of them seriously protecting it, and it was just them looking for disconnects or harassment at that point.
Yeah. And so at this point, again, this isn't their core territory. At least for NC, it isn't. FPL, it isn't.
Right.
And now Horde, it isn't. This is a key territory or contested territory that CO2 had filled in after Horde had left it. And you had Guardians of the Galaxy and Decline that were above this territory. It wasn't quite their territory either. So they were willing to give it up, it looks like. And you took advantage of that and took out their keep stars and their fortifications in the area.
Yeah, I mean, killing 2 staging heap stars, I mean, those are really important, and they're even more of a trophy than a regular keep star. So that was a real feather in our cap. But yeah, if I'm NC and I don't really like CO2 and I don't really care for GOTG, I wouldn't want to commit my super fleet after we'd already demonstrated that we could beat it. Like, there's very little, and it's better to just if you think you could put up a really strong defense at the Gates of Tribute and have goons go through Declan instead and burn themselves out there, like, that is 100% better for you. That is the right decision to make. So it made sense from their perspective to pull back on the commitment to the Titan fight. And that's why you saw Sort, like, I know NC's going to spin this against Sort, like he betrayed us or whatever by making a deal. That's why you saw Sort make a deal. He's like, these guys aren't going to defend me. I need to do something for my people. And that's where the breakdown of identity not being tied into one group came in and tore them apart.
Very interesting. We'll get right into that in just a second. First, this break. No, I'm just kidding.
First, a word from our sponsor.
Who's our sponsor? Dollar Shave Club.
Yeah.
Kirkland.
So I wanted to bring up a vivid example of what you don't do. Because NC was we were using, I think it was GOTG's midpoint keep star as a midpoint, and I needed a skill book, so I brought an expensive skill book up with like an injector or two, and it was in a Sino alt basically, and I said, hey, don't kill this Sino alt, it's me, Matterall, whatever. Sure enough, my Sino alt gets targeted and killed by GOTG guy, and I'm like, stop! Totally killed it.
And then he took Matterall, I know Vince Straken.
Yeah, I was like, I'm a friend of Vince's. No, but yeah, exactly. It wasn't that it was me, but it was that I'm on your team. Don't kill this. Oh, now the only thing moving around in this system is us. Like, we're the only ones there. Right. And a lot of times people are moving supplies in neutral alts, because this was a neutral alt, which was a thing. And it's one of those technicalities like not blue, gonna kill it kind of thing. But I just thought, like, wow, that really, really is a mistake, because now I don't feel like showing up and helping save your ass. So every little thing seems to count when you're getting these big things. And also petty guys like me tend to do things like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's you have you have bad blood, you have less grace, right? Like if a guy who's hard blue to me, like TNT or Nit or Bastion or whoever, if they shoot my neutral, I'm probably not going to be as mad. But when you don't have those same level of connection to them, it's easier to set you off, right? Like you're like, oh, these dudes are others; they're not us, and their intentions are bad. And like that's just the way humans work. We're tribal, and so the further away from your tribe they are, the less grace you're going to give them.
Right. So here we are. GOTG basically says, oops, we might be next. What are we going to do? And what happens?
Well, they paid us a lot of money to go away. I mean, it turned out we were going to do that anyway, but they didn't know that. And so I think it was the right decision for them.
But now some of your guys are mad at you for making a deal that stops your own progression. And it seemed like you guys took that seriously because you had a fireside chat with all your alliance mates and basically said, look, guys, we didn't message this right because it got out from under us, but this is a good deal for us. And this is why we were going to stop anyway. But
the
a lot of them
messaging was
like,
really bad. We didn't explain it well. We like Aerith made the messaging, and like, you know, if you want a smug post, he's the guy to go to, but to explain things well, probably not the way to do it. So we didn't do a good job there. So we had people who thought that we had agreed to leave the North alone for 6 months entirely. Like, we couldn't attack Horde, we couldn't attack NC Dot, we couldn't attack Mercenary Coalition, whoever, we couldn't attack PL. They thought all that was true. And so we just had to get out there and say, hey, that's not the case. We only agreed to leave GOTG alone for 6 months. That, you know, it was never our plan to continue into Declan and attack them. And I understand why they're mad, because they wanted to keep going, but like, when you're managing a campaign like this, you have to consider the support people. Like if you're the guy who shows up for the fleet once it's already been prepared, all the signals have been done, everything's been fueled, like that's all done for you. You show up, you jump, you press F1, you have a good time. I understand why you want to go on, but you have to consider the people who make all that happen. They put a lot of work in before and after the fleets, and there's only so much you can ask of them. Before you're asking too much of them, especially for space we're not going to keep. Like, we killed 10 keep stars. You know, we could have gone on more and fought in Australian time zone for another 3 or 4 months, but that's not a good way to that's not a good thing to ask for your guys. It's much better to say, hey, we'll take a break now. You go back. You know, if you want to crab, you can do that. If you want to play other games, you can do that. If you want to talk to your wife for the first time in 2 months, you can do that. But
take a shower.
Well, I mean,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, let me ask you. I mean, did Sort pay for something that we really weren't going to follow through with anyways?
100%. Yeah, we were out of there. Like,
that's what I before the show today. We're sitting there going, man, I don't know. I feel as though that, you know, Vegas is coming up, and you know, I don't feel that we were going to go grind deck on. I don't feel like we were going to go and commit to another 2 to 3 month excursion.
I mean, to be fair, if we had, there was a chance we could have stayed and hit like CCP and 8S28 and killed those keep stars. Like that wasn't something like that might have happened, but it probably wouldn't have. But the thing is, just because, you know, in retrospect we were going to leave, it doesn't make it the wrong choice for him. Like, I think he made the right choice with the information he had. He didn't know, and like, he was risking his whole alliance essentially on the fact that we would leave for Vegas, right? That's a pretty risky gamble.
Yeah, that's the big point there, right? Like, you guys may well have just said, "Yo, I wanted to leave," but 2 or 3 systems that you hit of his, which you guys are fully capable of doing, and he risks his entire alliance crumbling and like people going over and joining other alliances, or just saying, you know what, we've been taking this shit for too long, I'm out. Like, I'm just gonna do something. So like, there's a tremendous risk there for him that he weighed of.
Elise, if you were in his shoes, would you have made a similar decision? What would you have done?
I don't know. Generally, I tend to make those type of agreements before the fighting starts. But like with back in the day in BTEC-R, which is, you know, kind of a while ago, like, we had a deal with Goons that had existed for 2 months before about not hitting certain areas of space, right? So both of us were making like huge amounts of money. In terms of Sort's position, ideally, I'd never be in that position, but I mean, I don't fault him at all. Like, I don't think he made the wrong decision, even if there's like a huge chance of you guys just leaving after one area falls.
Well, and forget the idea of committing to a further grind up there to actually burn down the region, right? the other thing that this did do was it also removed the economic, oppression kind of op that was going on up there from, I forget what the name of, the Imperium Cloaky Camper group was, but
it's called Asher and the Boys.
Asher and the Boys. That's all been removed as well. So I mean, he, if nothing else, he bought himself 6 months of breathing room in order to regroup without having to, I don't know, relocate and regroup.
I don't think people realize how much of an effect that had in their alliance. You can look at the MER and see they were, they went from having like 3 trillion a month in mining to like 200 billion. Like it's a huge difference, and that's over a period of many months. So you can't calculate how much it is worth it for him to be able to rebuild. Like if we had just stayed there, even if we'd left the SIGs there, and they couldn't mine and rat to rebuild, he would have never recovered. So I think a good deal is one where everyone feels like, oh, I gotta, I didn't get exactly what I wanted, and their guys are really upset at giving away all this stuff. But some of our guys are like, man, we could have killed more. We should have kept going. So I think that probably indicates that everyone got something out of it.
Yeah, but they're not pulling the same duty you are.
In a month, there's other regions up there that are open. So I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
Initiative, just hold off. You only got a month. You can go up to MTACO if you want.
Targets to be determined. Yeah, I mean, initiative. They
didn't like the deal, right?
Yeah, no, they're much more in the vein of continual fighting, and but I mean, here's what I think is going to happen is that we're just, they're going to take the time to get reset their stuff, and then they'll come back with us and hit us hit something again a month from now. So I think it'll be in the long run fine. I think once again that was sort of a messaging thing where we didn't handle talking to everyone we should have, and the way we should have, because we went too quickly with that.
Right. All right. So you guys are still in the north. You haven't moved out yet. A deal has been signed. Also, there was a deal in the south, I guess. But PL, you weren't in the south. Sorry, Elise, you weren't in the south anymore, are you?
No, not so much. We have a few assets in a few staging areas, staging caches all over the place. Some are in the south, but as an entity right now, we're fully in the north.
Right. And so you've been gone for a little while, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think it's been, feels like 8 weeks-ish.
Yeah. And so that kind of came to an end too with some with a deal that was made down there as well. But this kind of begs the question, you're going to take a bit of a break, no doubt, Asher, after you maybe withdraw from the north. This kind of begs the question, is Horde next? Because you went after this area to harass it, to hobble its economic ability to raise an army and to fund it and all that. And it looks like if you're not going to attack the north any further, are you going to move over to tribute or make preparations for it?
Those are all great questions.
And someday they will be answered, but not today.
Time will tell.
Time will tell. Okay. But anyway,
what were the details of the Armistice agreement down in the south?
They have not been given.
Yeah, basically it's almost very similar to what's happened in the north as far as the terms: 6 months, no cookie camping of each other's space, and Frat or Winterco paid a large ISK indemnity. So we don't know what the number is, but I mean, I would assume somewhere between 500 billion and a trillion is what they paid. And but the terms are actually almost exactly identical to what is in the north. I wonder if the legacy guys use that as a sort of saying, hey, this just happened, so this is a good one to agree to.
You just dusted off the contract.
Yeah,
So,
they just crossed out a couple things, replacing.
Aaron sent the boilerplate over.
Yeah. I mean, you've seen the Eve Reddit. It's all people sending cease and desist now. So we're basically lawyer Reddit now.
So what you just implied there, Asher, is that these two peace settlements were not made in coordination. Like,
no, we didn't.
Legacy was not coordinating with. Okay.
No, I found out about it from Reddit or from a ping or something.
Well, I think that pretty much brings the war, the hot war, to an end, I think. But we look at this more of as a campaign, because we couldn't figure out like how to reference it. We still don't, which is very interesting, because nobody's pushed that title. And I think you made a reference, Asher, to that earlier. If you're winning the fights, you're not worried about the title.
Yeah.
But these do feel like campaigns that turned into a full war. We referred to it as a war. Other people, leadership, referred to it as a war. But
I think in the grand scheme, right? Again, when you take the two pieces together and kind of how they evolved, you do have a war that occurred there. But again, I think that the Imperium aspect of it, right, was a campaign within this larger war. That's all. But the question is, how do you wrap it together into something that will be, well, this happened at this time?
What defines this war was not like the land that changed hands, like, because this wasn't a war for territory. It was the fights that happened, the shifts in the meta and the shifts in perception. Like, those are going to be what people remember from this war, not that like someone took over, Fade or Pureblind.
I mean, there were some defining features, I think, about this one. I put this in the category of the first real war of the Citadel era, as well as Titans being the front line. Those were two things that I think were definable, or helped define this. Like, you can go back a bit. I'm not saying Citadels weren't attacked and things like that, but here is where the grinding of keep stars and the grinding of other structures within the Citadel era, I think, was at its largest.
I think it's the first large scale war where both sides felt comfortable to use supers and titans.
Yeah. I'm hopeful that we see more wars like this, but I'm concerned like it's going to take people who are going to be willing to commit to giving their enemy a big advantage. If that tether bug with Doomsday didn't exist, it would be much less of an advantage. But it's still an advantage. But as it is right now, that tether bug is brutal. It is really, really too strong, and I hope CCP fixes it, because I don't see that happening again. If it just stays where you can Doomsday and tether up in 1 minute of game time, that's pretty scary.
I'm pretty sure the North, at least in NC circles, it was like, this game, we can't fight these battles that we want to fight. At least this comes from Killabeath Lead FC there. And so we're not really going to participate in this. And there was a lot of withdrawing for that. There might have been other things. You guys definitely, on the other side, Asher, had strategic plays that outwitted the North. But overall, one of the big shadows over all this was that the servers weren't consistent enough to really have these fights effectively.
I felt the servers performed pretty well overall, especially compared to 9TAC4. I mean, if you have like 4,000 people in a system, especially with a bunch of carriers and Super 7 fighters out, I don't know what you're meant to expect, right? Like, that's
that said, it did perform better than 9TAC4, where people were knocked off and stayed off. At least in X47, I got knocked off like 5 times, but every time I was able to come back and actually save my Titan.
Same. But I didn't really have a huge problem with the server performance, and I do think it's a bit of revisionist history. I mean, like, it's you lose. What do you remember the final count for Titans and the X47 Hall timer? Was it 18-1? Like, you lose that, and you start looking for other things to say, like, hey, this is the reason we quit, not the fact that we lost really hard.
Yeah, I think it was like 18 or 19-2. I think.
No, you thought it was 2, but it was 1. It was just 1.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's a lot of ghosts and stuff in that one.
Yeah.
Actually, I thought it got up to 24-1 or 2.
Yeah, we killed over 20, but it was like I saw 20 flash red and disappear, but some of those never came up. And then apparently a couple of them, when they logged in the next day, the Titans that we had killed were there. So, it's just that ghosting. But anyway, it was either, by any measure, it was a giant victory. And so at that point, you don't mention, like, you don't say to your guys, we're not going to fight because we lost and, we're afraid to lose again. Like, that's a terrible messaging. You say, oh, the servers suck, we can't do this, or CO2 sucks, and they just aren't really willing to fight for it anymore. Like, everyone does this.
It could have been masking, like, we don't really want to lose. So it could have been masking it, saying the servers aren't fun, making it fun. But that is one of the moral hits came after X47. It was like, this is no fun. it might have been losing's no fun, but it also might have been this just the frustration of not being able to fight well.
I think part of it is, I mean, so here's the thing about server performance. It affects both sides equally, more or less, right? Like it's not an advantage more or less to one side over the other.
Yeah.
But it does feel frustrating when you've been sitting at your computer for like 10 hours and you're like, man, this sucks. Not only do you end up losing like whatever, how many Titans to one, or you lose a strategic objective. You're like, man, this entire time it sucked. I felt like I couldn't do anything. Ugh, damn, I hate this game. And you like kick the cat or something. Spoiler alert, don't kick the cat, please.
Of the 2 Titans I was running in the X47 Hall Timer, so say we killed around 18. Of the 2 Titans, one of them got on 3 Titan kill mails and one got on 2. Like that's how much I was actually shooting.
Yeah.
So, so it affects everyone, but and it does introduce an element of randomness, but I didn't find it to be oppressive.
It's like it's salt in the wound to the side that loses, right?
Yeah, well, it's like the Fozzie stuff thing. Like you won, and now here's your helping of work. And like, yeah, if you lose, you don't have anything like, well, we stomped them. You just have like, well, we lost, and it wasn't fun because I had to log in 38 times, right?
Yeah. It is quite miserable I mean, I would go one step further, and I think this probably explains PL's area or relevance in the current meta right now. Even winning those 10-hour-long slugfests is kind of unfun. Like I have very little enjoyment winning something that takes that long, even by like, unless it's like a total stomp where I get to like huge smug post. But if I hit like, I don't know, like 5 more Titans killed and lost or something like that in the strategic objective, and knowing I have to keep doing that, it feels kind of, after a while, you're like, man, I don't want to do this anymore, please.
Yeah.
At that point, though, like if you're not enjoying it, is it? And I'm not saying you haven't done this because I think you have, but is it time to let other people like take over the reins? If you don't,
I mean, I haven't been a campaign commander for like 2 years, so
I know you haven't. Like, you're just more like a guy who watches and maybe gives advice, right? Like that'd be a better.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, PL is a monster all by itself, and it takes on a different identity based on who's the most active. But personally, like where I'm standing, like I wouldn't want to, like I wouldn't be leading this campaign, and there's a reason that I'm not. Like obviously, there's.
Did you come up with the? Did you come up with the Chaos Trident? Was that an invention that you thought of?
That is not my strategy, but I don't think it's a terrible thing. I think it just got memed on a little bit too hard.
Like part of being like an FC is that people give you credit for things that you didn't do, and they also blame you for things that were out of your control, and you have to be willing to sort of accept both of the sides of those. Like, it wasn't like solely your brilliant maneuvers that won the fight. There were between 50 and 1,000 other people who were involved in that, and it also wasn't the reason that you lost the fight. But you're gonna get credit and blame for both.
And I remember when I was like just starting the FC, and I did something. It wasn't even my fault, right? Like someone, the dude in my fleet gave me a ping that wasn't the ping that I wanted, so I warped the fleet there. Got everyone horribly bombed. Shadu reamed me out for 8 months about this stupid mistake. I'm like, it wasn't even mine. He's like, it doesn't matter. It's your fault. You did it. And it kind of just feels like that. Yeah, like it just on the bigger stage when you start like leading alliance or leading a campaign type thing.
By the way, you know how different groups have different nomenclatures? I always find that ping one confusing because to me, a ping is a message on Jabber, and a purchase something you warp to.
Yeah, the Eve lexicon, the slight differences. Like we all have more or less the same thing, but the slight differences are really funny.
Yeah, and so I'm like, he sent a message and got you the wrong fleet, and I started to interpret it. They're like, oh, I got it now. Perch.
But yeah, he literally just yelled at me for doing something stupid, not for losing. Like he just wanted me to ream me out for making a mistake.
Did you make the same mistake again?
I've never been bombed before.
There you go. See, it worked.
All right, guys, we could go on forever about this. We have 2 great guests that can tell you so much about EVE Online and strategies and stuff like that, but we're going to have to call it quits after a couple hours. There is one last thing that we need to talk about since we have PL rep here, and Elise is the overall leader of Pandemic Legion. You recently had a robbery that was pretty large in scale. I don't know if you're comfortable talking about it, but what is it like on the PL side of things for this specific robbery?
I think the only people that are really bummed are the Alliance tournament pilots, because a lot of, I mean, those ships that were heisted were just literally from the Alliance tournament cache.
You should say what actually happened first. Do you want to characterize it, or should I?
All right, so essentially what happened is Blue Melon, who has been on and off in PL since like 2013, he co-led the Alliance tournament team 2 years ago. Last year he led it with Hydra Reloaded. And then this year he wanted to kind of get gold, because that's the one thing he's never been able to do as a tournament captain. And we're like, yeah, sure. You can lead the Alliance tournament team, or at least co-lead it with a guy named Lucas Kwan.
By get gold, you mean he's never won the tournament?
Yeah, he's never gotten a gold medal in the Alliance tournament as a captain. So that was on his EVE bucket list. So I was like, yeah, I'll enable that. We had a pretty good history with him before, so we're like, yeah, sure, we can do that. And so he co-led the Alliance tournament team with Lucas Kwan. Part of the preparation for the Alliance tournament is like preparing all the ships and different doctrines that you might need, because you have to make a snap decision, like 2 minutes, I'm going to fly this ship, let me hand out all the ships. And so for that, we had given him, I think it was 16 different Alliance tournament ships to prepare. There's like an Atana, 3 Rabisus, some Adrestias, a lot of Evangels and Chameleons, which were like really popular in that Alliance tournament. And
not anymore.
Yeah, thank God. But so Lucas Kwan was unavailable for that week. And so Blue Melon had those ships in his hangars to kind of be able to fly those doctrines on the fly, depending on how far we went in the Alliance tournament. And we got knocked out because our Alliance tournament team, wasn't up to the expectations that we set for ourselves. But it's really hard to compete in Alliance tournaments. And you can easily just make a snap decision on yourself and second guess yourself and get sucked into this little hole. But anyways, our Alliance tournament team didn't win that match. We got knocked out, and in his hangar were a bunch of ships. And he was super bummed, as well as the entire Alliance tournament team. They were all super bummed, right? So he didn't want to log into EVE Online. He didn't want to think about EVE Online. I think he's like a brain surgeon or something, or a brain surgeon to be. So he does a lot of schooling. So he's like, oh, I'm not going to log in. And then last week, he was going to log in to transfer the ships back to the Alliance tournament cache, which is held on one guy's account who used to play with PL a long time ago. His name is Curl. He's essentially our grandfather. He's the closest thing we have to like an original PL lifer in there. And he's the one that just holds the Alliance tournament cache, because he's the only person we deem to be trustworthy enough. So he's going to transfer it back to that guy. And then I guess he just made a post about how he was taking it.
Just wrote the post. Is that how you found out?
Yeah, for sure. Like someone pinged me the post. I was like, whoa. Didn't see that one coming. Like, here's the thing about like a heist. Like, it's not like he went into he found some little nook and took some things. If you give me a time machine, I will trust him with those ships again. Like, that's how like strongly he sold his level of trust.
The Schadenfreude amongst goons when they read about that was just off the charts. It was really something else. Like PL losing AT ships is like it's like the Nazal Ghul wet dream fantasy that was written out in real life.
Yeah. It's someone's fan fiction coming to life.
It really was.
Two things related to that, though. One, the other night in Open Comms when we were talking about this, Sword Dragon kind of said that this actually did hit kind of the rank and file, but never really said how. So if you can talk to that, whether it did or not. But then also, what does this do to? I mean, does PL's Alliance tournament team come into the Alliance tournament next year, flying everyday man ships?
I mean, some of those things represent duplicates that we had. Obviously, by virtue of winning 5 Alliance tournaments, or was it 6 Alliance tournaments? You do have quite a large cache of ships.
Did you guys ever win Atanas?
No, we did not win the Atanas.
Those are so rare. Like, that's going to be tough.
So Starfleet Commander's team won the Atanas. So if you ever need an Atana, you have to hit up Starfleet Commander.
I've heard that Summer Blink had like 20 of them. I like that they're just, and those all got vaped. Like, and there are not a lot of Atanas left.
So that and Cambions are ships that Summer Blink had like invested in, and yeah, there's not too many of those left anymore.
Wow.
But as far as how this affects PL rank and file, or PL the corporations in the alliance, or PL's ability to be PL in the regular part of the game, anything with that?
I mean, it does have some sort of effect. If we were to lose a massive fight and we would need a quick injection of liquid cash, a lot of times what we would do is we'd sell off one or two of those ships and use that to do that for to fund that sort of reimbursement. We don't have that much. Yeah, we don't have that much in terms of liquid ISK stored. We invest basically every dime that we get into some sort of project or program or something like that. And likewise, if there's a wonky program that we want to start, then we kind of sometimes sell one or two of those ships when the time arises. But in terms of like everyday income, it's not like, oh geez, PL isn't going to be able to refund your isotopes anymore because we used to sell one of these off a month. Not quite, but the people it does hit really hard is the Alliance Hornets players, because this is their thing. This is what kind of keeps them with a huge competitive advantage, something they've earned over years. And the thing that shocked me is like Blue played with these Alliance Hornet dudes for like 8 months over the last 3 years.
Elise, I want to fly and lose a whiptail. You guys need to fund me a Titan SRP? Let me know.
Sounds good. I don't know if we have any whiptails. I'm sure we have like one or two, but we never like sell a ship if we have under 5 of them, right? So the Rabisu, and so Fiends, we're totally fine. Like he could steal a bunch of Fiends, I don't care. But when it comes to like Rabisus and Atanas, like that really fucks the team over. And the thing that shocked me about the whole thing, obviously the whole theft of it all was pretty shocking, but the other part was just like knowing that it's only fucking over the Alliance Hornet guys that he like bled and played with for months on end. So
at least is the story about the Titan thing true? Or did he make that up?
No, that's totally true. So though I guess it kind of makes me look like a dick a little bit. So here's what happened. In like 2011, we have a bunch of a lot of people want to join PL, right? That's kind of how it works. And there is a little bit of like the meme of that era is like recruitment scamming. It's something that goons used to do. It's something that a lot of people used to do, and
They still do it.
And they still do it. Like the whole thing back in the day was, yo, give me all of your stuff in Jita and I'll take it to where we're staging. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And the person doing this is just John Q. Pubby in your alliance. It's not like a director or something. So at some level, there's a guy in PL named Centraspike, who I don't know how he finds these people, because at this point, Blue Melon wasn't like a well-known name. So he found Blue Melon, who wanted to join PL. And I guess they were just flying around in the same area. And so he goes to Centraspike. He's like, yo, I want to join PL. And so Centraspike says, yo, okay, here's how it's going to work. If you go on the forums, it says you have to make an application. But because I'm a trusted member of the Pandemic Legion and Habitual Euthanasia family, I can fast track your application. Here's what you have to do. You have to come to our system in Aristald, and you're going to go to a tower that's 130 AU from the station. So just to set the stage for people that don't know, back in the day, to apply to a corporation, you couldn't do it in space. You couldn't just click and hit apply to join. You would have to go to where they had a corporate office to join. So Aristald was one of the systems that we had a corporate office in. So because they had a tech moon there at the time. So he told Blue Melon, don't post about this anywhere or anything, but you can come to Aristald, you can get in our tower, I'll give you the password, and then you can leave your Erebus and go to the station, put the application in, and then come back and get in your Erebus. And so he comes in, he like checks to make sure the password works, and he's very cautious. And so he apparently, this is what I get from Centric, because I wasn't involved in this. He waits until local is completely empty and it's like a weird time of night. And so he goes into the tower, ejects from his Erebus, and warps to the station, which is 120 AU away. And you guys know how slow pods warp. And he puts the application in, which sends a ping to the entire corp saying so-and-so has applied. And so then this guy sees that, logs in, and gets in the Erebus because he's logged off right next to somewhere at the tower. All in the time it takes Blue Melon to warp 120 AU in his pod. And then so I guess the section where he goes like, comes to me and I say, yo, who even are you? I literally have never heard of the name Blue Melon. He's like, hey, can I get my Erebus back? And I'm like, I don't know who you are. Like, I'm sorry. Like,
did you know all this when you gave him the AT ships, or was this like a surprise that later on you found out that?
No. I knew this full well. So
What?
So
Elise, come on, buddy. Why?
He later joined PL in the Corp BOP. It's Pfeiffer's Corp, Tropa de Elite, right? So he joined PL legitimately by joining Tropa de Elite. And Pfeiffer, who is the CEO of that corp, is like, hey, this guy, Blue Melon, he's been really useful. And it's true. He had been super useful. He had been like doing stuff in fleets. He'd been like really just going all out. And he was like, he's really been useful, but he's kind of like, his ego's still a little bit bruised. You guys stole his Titan. And so I was like, yeah, that was 2 years ago. It was pretty dumb. I heard about it from Central Spike because he wouldn't shut up about it. I'll send him 85 bill to reimburse the Titan. And so I sent it to either to Pfeiffer, or because Pfeiffer wanted credit for it, or someone in BOP. And so he got his Titan reimbursed in terms of ISK 2 years later.
Okay, I see. I mean, that makes more sense. That why you trusted him.
I mean, he's a super loyal dude. Like, you're talking about a guy who loaned us his State Raven issue, like a trillion ISK ship.
Oh, was that his?
Yeah, that's Blue's.
How does he? Do you know how he funds this stuff? Like, how do you get that much ISK?
I have no idea.
He's a brain surgeon. Oh, I'm just kidding. But it's funny because I think Blue Melon was the guy that when you guys were attacking Brave, he's the guy that tricked Lenny Kravitz too into paying him a bunch of money to protect Lenny's. He had a bunch of capitals in this forward operating base that you guys were assaulting. And he said, well, if you pay me, we won't destroy those or something like that. And
unfortunately, that was someone else. That wasn't
Blue Melon.
That was Blue Magier.
Oh, you're right. Okay, my bad.
He literally typed that in local, and then Lenny sent him a bunch of money, and he was like, what do I do with this, guys? Like, he was literally just shit posting.
I think I just scammed someone.
Bill.
Brain says he's a heart surgeon, which I think means that he's just like going to a singles meeting. That's why he plays Eve. He's just trying to meet potential clients.
Yeah. So maybe that's the meme. He's trying to force me into like a heart attack.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for explaining that. Appreciate it. And we're going to have actually an interview with Blue later this week. Maybe some of the guys from Amamaki Police, which are his, and we'll to them and so they can review what happened on their side. Sorry to hear about that. At least that must be a blow, at least to morale for some of your guys.
It feels bad. But ultimately it was my fault. So I'll somehow make it right.
That's one of those things where it's going to be like it's a real punch in the gut, but it's not going to change your destiny at all, right? Like it's just something that feels bad, but it's not going to change the path of PL.
I'm not going to say that it's like it has no effect whatsoever and that we can easily replace it and we have like way more. Like, yeah, we do have way more, but who cares? Like, that's still a huge feels bad man right there. But I think we'll be in a while. Like, we'll be fine. We'll come out of it somehow.
At least I think the GSM has got the Fiend nerfed twice now. Like they nerfed the Hector point, and then they're changing Hector so that the coolest thing about the Fiend applies to all Hectors, and that you could fly around with your bubble up and not have a disruption to your mass.
Yeah, so you just have to keep nerfing all the AT ships. So go for it. I'll sign like a Sword Dragon type deal for it.
All right. By the way, Asher, you keep calling it GSM. Is that on purpose?
No, that's what Sarah for one of those tinfoil people calls it. I think CO2 was also paying out that the GSM got GigX banned. It wasn't GigX, it was the GSM that did it.
It's the Goon Council.
Yeah, Goon Seller Management. Yeah.
Okay. The GSM. Oh, that's funny. All right, guys. Thanks very much, Asher and Elise.
I did have one thing to chime in on, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
So for the last 3 years, changing tune completely, there's been a charity stream that goes on the Eve Twitch channels for 72 hours straight. There's like a bunch of dudes involved, and it all goes to like a real life charity. Last year, I think they set the record for most money raised by a player group for a charity at Eve Online, which is quite a big accomplishment, knowing how charitable EVE Online players are. They raised something like $35,000 for the charity Able Gamers. The organization is called EVE-a-thon, or I guess the event is called EVE-a-thon. It starts this Friday at midnight Eve time, or midnight Eve time Friday. So I guess Thursday night for the US folks. And it runs an entire 72 hours. It's always up. It's going to go over and over and over for 72 straight hours. I know Rain is involved, so maybe she'll post some stuff about it. But there's like streamers like Bjorn being there. There's like the Zarvoxes of the world. There's like 13 to 20 like quality streamers, and it's for a really good cause. It's for a charity known as Special Effect. So if you guys just want to tune in sometime this weekend, or if you see it, you should just tune in. Maybe throw some real life dollary dues at it.
Yeah, I think Talking in Stations next week is going to be a part of that. There was a scheduling conflict. We'll see if that worked out, and if it did, we'll definitely be a part of that. So next week, if you're watching live, we'll be asking for a lot of donations for a good cause, and hopefully being a part of this huge thing that EVE players do. Thanks, Elise, for bringing that up.
Yeah, it's one of the cool things about EVE Online when it ever like delves into like the real world type things and doing things for good. So.
Number one.
Doing actual good things. Right. And also there was while we were on air today, there was a big fight in Wormhole Space. We'll cover that next week as well. All right. Well, Artemis, thanks for showing up. Dirk had to leave early. Not early, but on time, because we actually went a little bit late, but it was such a good explanation of what had happened in the last few months that we had to just go with it. And thanks, Asher and Elise, for showing up. That's all we have time for this week. We will see you next week on a special Talking in Stations.